I never thought our playful jabs would lead to this. Looking back, I can see how we crossed a line. But at the time, it all seemed like harmless fun. God, how wrong we were. It's funny how life can change in an instant, how years of built-up resentment can explode in a single moment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Meredith, and this is the story of how I lost the love of my life and found myself in the process. I met Nathan in college. He was the quiet, bookish type, always with his nose in a textbook or scribbling away in a notebook. I was drawn to his gentle nature, his kind eyes, and the way he seemed to see the world differently from everyone else. We started dating in our sophomore year, and by the time we graduated, we were engaged. Our wedding was a small affair, just close family and friends. I remember standing at the altar, looking into Nathan's eyes, thinking I was the luckiest woman in the world. If only I'd known then how I'd come to take that luck for granted. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. We were young in love and ready to take on the world together. Nathan got a job at a local publishing house, while I pursued my dream of becoming a journalist. We bought a small house in the suburbs, adopted a dog, and started talking about having kids. It was picture perfect. But life has a way of chipping away at perfection, doesn't it? It started small, as these things often do. A little joke here, a snide comment there. Nathan was always an easy target. Too nice for his own good, that one. Always ready with a self-deprecating laugh, never fighting back. We thought he was in on the joke. We were idiots. I remember the first time I really noticed it. We were at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, about 3 years into our marriage. Nathan had just started talking about a new manuscript he was editing at work, his eyes lighting up with excitement. It's this fascinating historical fiction piece, he was saying, set during the... "Oh, Nathan," my mother interrupted, rolling her eyes. "No one wants to hear about your boring books. Why don't you tell us about something interesting for a change?" I laughed along with everyone else, not noticing the way Nathan's smile faltered, the light in his eyes dimming just a bit. It became a pattern after that. Every family gathering, every dinner with friends, Nathan became the butt of the joke. "Hey Nathan," my brother would call out, still working at that dead-end job. "When are you going to get a real career?" Or my sister, "Nathan, honey, are you sure you want seconds? That shirt's looking a little tight." And me, God help me, I joined in. "Oh, you know Nathan," I'd say with a laugh. He'd forget his head if it wasn't attached to his shoulders. Each time, Nathan would laugh along, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. But we were too caught up in our own cruel amusement to notice. Or maybe we just didn't want to see it. Years passed, and the jokes got meaner, the jabs sharper. Nathan's quiet nature, once endearing, became a target. His passion for literature, which I had once admired, became something to mock. Even his appearance wasn't spared. His slightly receding hairline, his growing waistline, all became fodder for our so-called humor. Looking back, I can see how it affected him. The way he started to withdraw, to speak less at family gatherings. The light in his eyes when he talked about his work grew dimmer and dimmer, until it was barely a flicker. But at the time, I was blind to it all. I was too busy with my own life, you see. My career was taking off. I'd moved from small local stories to bigger pieces, even getting a few articles published in national magazines. I was riding high on my success, and Nathan was just there. A fixture in my life that I'd stopped appreciating. Our 10th wedding anniversary should have been a wake-up call. I forgot about it entirely, too wrapped up in a story I was chasing. Nathan had planned a surprise dinner, made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first date. When I came home late, full of excitement about my story and oblivious to the date, the hurt in his eyes was palpable. "I'm sorry, Nathan," I said, not really sorry at all. "You know how important this story is. We can celebrate another time, can't we?" He nodded, that same forced smile on his face. "Of course, Mer, it's fine." But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. The day it all came to a head is seared into my memory. It was supposed to be a celebration. I just landed my biggest story yet, an expose on corporate corruption that was set to make waves. My family decided to throw a party, ostensibly to celebrate my success. But looking back, I think they just wanted an excuse to drink and gossip. I remember walking into my parents' house, the air thick with the smell of my mother's cooking and the sound of laughter. Nathan was by my side, as always, quiet and supportive. I gave his hand a squeeze before we entered the fray, not noticing how he hesitated before squeezing back. The party was in full swing by the time we arrived. My parents, my siblings and their spouses, a few close friends, all there to congratulate me. The wine was flowing, and so were the compliments. I basked in the attention, barely noticing that Nathan had drifted to the periphery of the room. It was my father who started this time. He had a few too many glasses of wine, his face flushed, and his voice too loud. A toast. He called out, raising his glass, to my brilliant daughter Meredith. Who would have thought that scrawny little girl who couldn't string two words together would become such a hotshot journalist? Everyone laughed, clinking glasses. I felt a flush of pride, tempered only slightly by the backhanded nature of the compliment. And to Nathan, my father continued, his voice taking on a mocking tone. The man behind the woman, or shall I say way behind. The room erupted in laughter. I joined in, God help me. I can still see Nathan's face, that forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But we were too far gone to notice, too caught up in our own cruel amusement. My brother Mike chimed in next. Hey Nathan, he called out, his words slightly slurred. I heard the publishing house is struggling. What's the matter? People finally realize reading is for losers. More laughter, more wine. Nathan just stood there, clutching his untouched glass, taking it all in silence. I should have seen it coming, should have put a stop to it, but I didn't. Then my sister Sarah, always the one to take things too far, decided to go for the jugular. You know, she said, leaning in conspiratorially, I always wondered how our little Meredith ended up with such a, well, let's call it a unique specimen. Tell me, Nathan, did you have to trick her into marrying you, or did she just feel sorry for you? The room went quiet for a moment. Even in our drunken state, we knew she crossed a line. But then, to our shame, the laughter started again. Louder this time, more raucous. As if by laughing harder, we could pretend it was all still in good fun. That's when it happened. Nathan stood up so suddenly his chair toppled backward, crashing to the floor. The noise was like a gunshot in the sudden silence that fell over the room. Enough, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I'd never heard him speak like that before. It sent a chill down my spine. You think this is funny. You think I'm a joke. He turned to face each of us in turn, his eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen before. Well, congratulations. You've had your fun. But I'm done being your punching bag. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, tossing it onto the table. It landed with a soft thud that somehow seemed to echo in the stunned silence. What's that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Open it. Nathan replied, his tone easy. With trembling hands, I reached for the envelope. As I unfolded the papers inside, I felt the blood drain from my face. Divorce papers. He'd been carrying them around, waiting for the right moment. Or maybe the wrong one. Nothing, please, I started to say, but he cut me off. Save it, Meredith. I've heard enough from all of you to last a lifetime. He turned to address the room at large. I may not be the most successful, or the most outgoing, or whatever the hell else you all think I should be. But I'm a human being, and I deserve better than this. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. I've already packed my things. I'll be staying with a friend until I can find a place of my own. Meredith, have your lawyer contact mine. The details are in the envelope. And just like that, he was gone. The slam of the front door seemed to shake the whole house. Or maybe that was just my world crumbling around me. The silence that followed was deafening. We all stood there, frozen, the weight of what had just happened settling over us like a heavy blanket. It was my mother who finally broke the silence. Well, she said, her voice unnaturally high, I'm sure he'll calm down. He'll be back, Meredith. Don't you worry. But I knew better. The look in Nathan's eyes, the finality in his voice. This wasn't a temper tantrum. This was the end. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I tried calling Nathan, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I went to his office, only to be told he'd taken an indefinite leave of absence. It was like he'd vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the ghost of our failed marriage. My family tried to rally around me, but their support felt hollow. It was never good enough for you anyway, they'd say, or you're better off without him. But their words rang false, tainted by the memory of their cruelty. I threw myself into my work, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of research and writing. But even that felt empty now. Every word I wrote reminded me of Nathan, of how he'd always been my first reader, offering gentle critiques and unwavering support. I'd taken that for granted, just like I'd taken him for granted. It was about a month after Nathan left that I finally hit rock bottom. I was sitting in my living room, surrounded by half-empty takeout containers and crumpled tissues, when there was a knock at the door. For a moment, my heart leaped. Could it be Nathan? But when I opened the door, it wasn't my husband standing there. It was Claire, Nathan's younger sister. We'd never been close. She'd always kept her distance from my family, and now I understood why. "Hello, Meredith," she said, her voice cool. "May I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside to let her enter. She looked around the messy living room, her expression unreadable. "Nathan asked me to pick up the rest of his things," she said finally. "He said you'd know where to find them." "Claire," I started, my voice cracking. "Is he okay? Where is he?" She turned to look at me then, her eyes hard. "He's fine. Better than fine, actually. He's staying with me for now, until he figures out his next move." "Please," I said, hating the desperation in my voice. "Can you tell him I'm sorry, that I want to talk?" Claire was quiet for a long moment, studying me. Then she sighed, some of the hardness leaving her expression. "You know, Meredith," she said, "I always wondered what Nathan saw in you. He's such a kind, gentle soul, and you and your family always seemed so harsh." I flinched at her words, but I couldn't deny their truth. "But he loved you," she continued. "God, did he love you? Even when you forgot your anniversary, even when you laughed along with your family's cruel jokes. He always defended you, always said there was more to you than what others saw." Tears were flowing freely down my face now, but I made no move to wipe them away. "I don't know if there's any coming back from this," Claire said softly. "But if you really want to make things right, you need to take a long, hard look at yourself and your family. Because the way you've been treating Nathan, it's not okay. It was never okay." She was right, of course. And as I helped her gather Nathan's remaining belongings, as I watched her drive away with the last physical reminders of my husband, I knew what I had to do. The next few weeks were the hardest weeks of my life. I started therapy, forcing myself to confront the ugly parts of my personality that I'd ignored for so long. I cut back on work, realizing that my ambition had become a convenient excuse for neglecting my marriage. And hardest of all, I distanced myself from my family. That last part wasn't easy. There were tears, recriminations, accusations of betrayal. But I stood firm. "We were wrong," I told them. "All of us. The way you treated Nathan, the things we said, it was cruel. And I won't be a part of it anymore." Slowly, painfully, things began to change. My parents, seeing how serious I was, agreed to family counseling. My siblings, at first resistant, began to see how their behavior had contributed to the dissolution of my marriage. It wasn't easy, and there were many setbacks along the way, but gradually we began to heal. As for me, I threw myself into becoming a better person. I volunteered at a local literacy program, remembering how passionate Nathan had been about books and reading. I started writing for myself again, not for accolades or recognition, but for the pure joy of it. And I learned to be kinder, to think before I spoke, to consider how my words might impact others. It was nearly a year after Nathan left that I finally heard from him. It was a simple email, just a few lines long. Meredith, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to let you know that I've accepted a position with a publishing house in Seattle. I'll be moving at the end of the month. I've instructed my lawyer to send over the final divorce papers. I think it's time we both moved on. Take care, Nathan. Reading those words, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Sadness, of course. This really was the end of our marriage. But also a strange sense of peace. Nathan was moving on, starting a new chapter in his life. And in a way, so was I. I replied to his email, congratulating him on the new job and wishing him all the best. I told him how sorry I was for everything that had happened, how I'd been working on myself and my family. I didn't ask for another chance. I knew I didn't deserve one. But I did tell him that I hoped one day he could forgive me. His response came a few days later. Meredith, thank you for your email. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well and that you've been working on things with your family. That couldn't have been easy, and I admire your courage. As for forgiveness, it's a process. I'm not there yet, but I hope to be someday. What happened between us left deep scars, but I'm healing. I hope you are too. Take care of yourself, Nathan. It wasn't much, but it was something. A glimmer of hope that maybe someday we could at least be at peace with each other. The divorce was finalized a month later. I cried as I signed the papers, mourning the end of a relationship that had once held so much promise. But I also felt a sense of resolve. This was a new beginning, a chance to take all the hard lessons I'd learned and become a better person. Life went on. I continued my work with a literacy program, finding a sense of purpose in helping others discover the joy of reading. My relationship with my family, while still complicated, had improved dramatically. We'd learned to communicate better, to show love and support without resorting to mockery or cruelty. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself getting into a new rhythm of life. My career, once the driving force of my existence, took on a different meaning. I still wrote, but now I focused on stories that mattered. Pieces that shed light on social issues, that gave voice to the voiceless. It was challenging, often heartbreaking work, but it fulfilled me in a way that chasing headlines never had. My family, too, had undergone a transformation. Our gatherings, once raucous affairs full of barbed jokes and thinly veiled insults, became quieter, more thoughtful. We learned to listen to each other, to offer support instead of criticism. It wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard after all, but it was progress. I dated a few times, but nothing serious. Each relationship felt like it was missing something, and it took me a while to realize what it was. They were missing the quiet understanding, the gentle support that Nathan had always provided. I wasn't looking for another Nathan. I knew that ship had sailed. But I was looking for someone who embodied the qualities I had once taken for granted in him. It was at a book launch event for one of my articles turned book that I saw Nathan again. 3 years had passed since he'd left, and the sight of him across the crowded room nearly took my breath away. He looked good, more confident somehow. The shy, reserved man I'd married had been replaced by someone who seemed comfortable in his own skin. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to fade away. Then he smiled, a small, hesitant thing, and made his way over to me. "Hello, Meredith," he said, his voice warm. "Congratulations on the book." "Nathan," I breathed, hardly believing he was really there. "Thank you. What are you doing here?" He held up a copy of my book. "I've been following your work. This piece, about the impact of literacy programs in underprivileged communities, it's powerful stuff." I felt a flush of pride mixed with a twinge of regret. Once upon a time, I would have dismissed such praise from Nathan as biased or uninformed. Now, knowing his expertise in the publishing world, it meant more than any glowing review. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "That means a lot, coming from you." We fell into an awkward silence, years of unspoken words hanging between us. Finally, Nathan cleared his throat. "Listen, I know this might be overstepping, but would you like to grab a coffee sometime? Catch up properly?" I was nodding before he even finished speaking. Yes, I'd like that. We met at a small cafe a few days later. The conversation was stilted at first, both of us dancing around the elephant in the room. But as we talked about our work, our families, the things we've been doing since the divorce, the tension began to ease. I have to admit, Nathan said, stirring his coffee absently, I was surprised to see the direction your writing has taken. Not that you weren't always talented, but I was more interested in chasing the next big scoop than in making a difference. I finished for him, smiling ruefully. You're not wrong. I've done a lot of thinking since. Well, since everything happened. Nathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. I can see that. You seem different. More grounded, maybe. I'm trying to be, I admitted. Losing you, it made me take a hard look at myself, at who I was and who I wanted to be. I didn't like what I saw. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. I'm sorry it took that for you to realize it, but I'm glad you did. You are always capable of amazing things, Meredith. You just needed to see it for yourself. Tears pricked in my eyes. Nathan, I'm so sorry. For everything. The way I treated you, the things I let my family say. It was inexcusable. He reached across the table, squeezing my hand briefly before letting go. I know, and I forgive you, Meredith. It took time, but I forgave you a long time ago. We talked for hours, long after our coffee had gone cold, about the pain we'd both gone through, the lessons we'd learned, the people we'd become. It wasn't easy. There were moments when old hurts resurfaced, when we both had to take a step back and breathe. But it was cathartic, like lancing a wound that had never properly healed. As the cafe began to close around us, Nathan glanced at his watch and sighed. I should get going. I have an early flight back to Seattle tomorrow. My heart sank. I'd almost forgotten that he didn't live here anymore, that this wasn't the beginning of something new, but rather the closing of an old chapter. Of course, I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. It was really good to see you, Nathan. To talk like this. He smiled, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. It was good to see you too, Meredith. Take care of yourself, okay? I watched him walk away, a bittersweet ache in my chest. It wasn't until he was almost at the door that I found my voice again. Nathan, wait. He turned, eyebrows raised in question. I know you're leaving, and I know we can't go back to how things were, but do you think we could stay in touch? As friends? For a moment, I thought he was going to say no, but then he smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up his whole face. I'd like that, he said softly. I'd like that a lot. As I walked home that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. Nathan and I weren't getting back together. Too much had happened. We'd both changed too much for that. But we'd found a way to make peace with our past, to forge a new kind of relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. The next few months were a whirlwind. Nathan and I kept in touch via email and the occasional phone call. We shared stories about our work, our families, our lives. It was different from how we'd been as a couple. There was a freedom in our conversations now, a lack of expectations that allowed us both to be truly honest with each other. My family, when I told them about reconnecting with Nathan, reacted with a mix of surprise and cautious optimism. They'd come a long way too, learning to be more thoughtful, more empathetic. My mother even asked if she could write Nathan a letter apologizing for her behavior. I passed along the letter, and though Nathan's response was brief, it was kind. Another small step towards healing old wounds. Life continued to evolve. My book did well, opening up new opportunities in my career. I started giving talks at schools and community centers about the importance of literacy and education. It was during one of these talks that I met James. James was a high school English teacher, passionate about literature and education. We bonded over our shared love of words, our desire to make a difference in our communities. He was kind, thoughtful, with a quick wit that never strayed into cruelty. We started dating, taking things slow, both of us carrying the lessons of past relationships. I told Nathan about James during one of our calls. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I worried I'd overstepped. "That's great, Meredith," Nathan said finally, his voice warm. "He sounds like a good guy. I'm happy for you." And the thing was, I believed him. Just as I was genuinely happy when he told me a few months later that he'd started seeing someone too. A fellow editor at his publishing house named Olivia. Life has a funny way of coming full circle sometimes. 5 years after that disastrous party that ended our marriage, I found myself planning another gathering. This time, it was to celebrate the launch of Nathan's first novel. A beautiful, poignant story about forgiveness and second chances that had me in tears by the end. My family was there on their best behavior. James was by my side, a steady, comforting presence. And Nathan was there with Olivia, both of them glowing with happiness. As I stood to give a toast, I looked around the room at these people who had shaped my life in so many ways. My family, who had learned along with me the power of kindness and the damage that thoughtless words can do. James, who had shown me that it was possible to find love again, to trust and be trusted. And Nathan, my ex-husband turned friend, who had forgiven me when I didn't deserve it and inspired me to become a better person. To Nathan, I said, raising my glass, for reminding us all of the power of words, to hurt, yes, but also to heal, and to second chances in all their forms. As the room echoed my toast, I caught Nathan's eye. He smiled, nodding slightly, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We'd come so far from where we started, all of us. It hadn't been an easy journey, but standing there, surrounded by love and genuine warmth, I knew it had been worth it. Life isn't perfect. There are still days when old habits try to reassert themselves, when a careless word slips out before I can stop it. But now I catch myself. We all do. And in those moments, I remember the lessons I've learned, the people I've hurt and been hurt by, the growth that came from acknowledging my mistakes. I think about the woman I was, the one who laughed at cruel jokes and put her ambition before the feelings of those she loved. And I think about the woman I am now, still flawed, still learning, but trying every day to be better, to be kinder, to use my words to build up rather than tear down. It's not always easy. But as I look around at the life I've built, the relationships I've mended, and the new ones I've formed, I know it's worth it. Because in the end, it's not about being perfect. It's about recognizing our mistakes, learning from them, and doing better next time. It's about forgiveness. Of others, yes, but also of ourselves. And it's about love, not the flashy, dramatic kind you see in movies, but the quiet, enduring kind. The kind that supports without smothering, that cherishes without possessing. The kind that allows us to grow, to change, to become the best versions of ourselves. That's the lesson I learned from losing Nathan, from the long, painful process of rebuilding my life and my relationships. And it's a lesson I carry with me every day, a reminder to be kind, to be thoughtful, to use my words to heal rather than harm. Because in the end, that's what really matters. Not success, not status, not being the funniest or the smartest in the room. What matters is how we treat each other, how we lift each other up, how we help each other grow. It's a lesson I wish I'd learned earlier, but I'm grateful to have learned it at all. And as I stand here, surrounded by the people I love, I make a silent promise to myself, to them, to the world at large, to always strive to be better, to be kinder, to use my words and my actions to make the world a little bit brighter. Because that's the power we all have every single day. The power to choose kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment, love over indifference. It's not always the easy choice, but it's always the right one. And in the end, isn't that what life is all about?